Hi, everyone. My name is Kristin Snowden. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California. And today we are going to cover a topic that I think we can all, it can stir up feelings in all aspects of our life right now for everyone across the board, which is the subject of grief and loss. This is one of the subjects that I think I'm most impassioned by because our culture sucks at it, quite frankly. We are a hot mess when it comes to how to handle somebody in a state of grief and loss. When we are in a state of grief and loss, we don't really feel safe to kind of run through the gamut of emotions. We don't feel like there's people out there who can hold space for it. And sometimes we don't even realize what we're going through is a version of grief and loss, because sometimes we'll mistakenly think, oh, grief and loss are when your parent dies, or when someone gets dumped, like when there's a literal loss. But one thing that I want you to appreciate is right now we're all suffering collective grief and loss, because crisis is a state of grief and loss. Crisis is a loss of our former life. I don't know about how many times you guys, I don't know about you, but how often I look on TV and I see like a party going on, or like people randomly hugging each other, and I'm like, oh, don't do that. Or it's just, you see that and you're like, oh yeah, remember when we used to go to parties and just casually like stand near people and everyone looked normal, or there's a game going on and everyone's sitting on the bleachers together. And so there's this collective kind of loss and sadness for what our former lives were, wondering what our new normal is going to look like. Loss of not being able to physically touch people, or the wondering if that's a person that's dangerous or not. Gathering, kids attending school. Oh my gosh, I grieve the loss of my children not being in school, and I watch my children grieve the loss of not being able to be in school. So there is so much grief and loss going on right now. And I just wanted to give everybody a language to understand, because one of the most important parts about grief is we need to know that it's happening in our body, have a language for it, and we need to have witnesses to it. Glennon Doyle said that grief is kind of like your receipt that you hold to prove that you loved or you were loved. And you need to be able to kind of walk around with it and say, look, this is proof that I made myself vulnerable, that I am vulnerable to this world, that I made myself vulnerable to this environment, and I loved, and I hurt, and I lost. And that there needs to be witness to that. And there's nothing wrong with it. And usually what happens is our society, because we're not being really given a language to it, we also kind of have negative feelings about being vulnerable, and we can't even come to terms with our own concepts of like death and how scary that is, or being dumped, or being rejected, or losing a child. Like we can't stomach the idea of the vulnerability of that happening to ourselves, that we struggle being present with other people for it. So that is something that gets in the way. The other issue is us as a society, we have struggles with comparative suffering. Well, I can't say that I'm struggling in this coronavirus issue because I still have a job and my family is healthy and I've not lost anybody. But the truth is that whatever your loss is, in whatever grief and loss you're dealing with in that moment, is the greatest, most important grief and loss to you in those moments. And you don't need to discount it, minimize it, ignore it, etc., just because there's starving children in other places, or there's someone who has suffered a greater loss than you have. So there has to be, and that takes courage, by the way, to understand that. So let's just throw out some different types of grief and loss that there is, that maybe you didn't realize is grief and loss. But can be the end of a divorce or a relationship. There's a grief and loss that goes on there. There's obviously the death or a loss of a person. So either literally they have left this earth, or they have left the relationship, they have dumped you, they've betrayed you, they are not the person you thought they were anymore, you do not have the life that you thought you had, you didn't get a job that you thought you were going to have, life wasn't ending up in the pathway that you thought you were going. That's all grief and loss. They are messy emotions, and everyone grieves in a different way. But back in the day, a woman named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross kind of did a big famous study on what she calls like the stages of grief. There's 5 stages of grief. And someone who mentored and worked under her is David Kessler. He's still alive and well, and he does a lot of really great research and writing on grief and loss as well. Not only that, but he lost his 21-year-old son. So he can also come from a space of really, really being able to wrap your brain around, you know, your own loss is your greatest loss and the states of suffering. And he says, you know, there's these classic 5 stages of grief, but if you went up to someone grieving, they wouldn't be like, oh, I'm currently at the depression stage. You know, it's just more, the 5 stages are more about for the people around you to kind of observationally say, oh, she's in a state of depression right now. Oh, she's in a state of bargaining right now. So let's talk about them. This is the 5 stages of grief are only to help give you a language to identify what might be happening to you or to a loved one right now. And for those of you who are chiming in because you're in a state of a marital crisis, maybe because there's been a discovery of any kind of addiction, or there's been betrayal, this definitely can apply to you. You'll run through the gamut of the following. So our acronym that we use when we were learning all this in school is DABDA, D-A-B-D-A. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So when faced with this new way of life, there's denial. So let's take this coronavirus, COVID new way of life that we've had suddenly brought upon us unexpectedly, right? Our old way of life is gone. There's new things happening all over us, almost it seems like on a daily, weekly basis. And there are currently people, if we kind of span the swath of like just the community around us, we can look at people right now who are at levels of denial. So this isn't happening, minimizing it, some version of that. Anger, we see that at the grocery store, at the schools who aren't opening up for our children, at, you know, I'm in Southern California, so we're in a pretty strong level of lockdown, I think, compared to a lot of the country. So there's a lot of anger going on here, a lot. Bargaining. So bargaining would be like, oh, you know, my child's sick, but maybe if you know, God, please just take my life instead of. Or bargaining, if I was a better wife, if I treated him better, maybe this tragedy wouldn't have happened. Or maybe if I was more religious. Or bargaining for the COVID coronavirus would just be, you know, let's all, you know, let's hang in there. If I hang in there during this time period right now, then, you know, maybe a month from now it'll get back to normal again. And I can, you know, just, it's a way of kind of hanging in onto hope, or hanging on to a story that will make this not be the way that it's supposed to be. You know, maybe, sorry, that's getting political, but maybe November 4th, after November 3rd, I've heard it'll all go away. You know, that's possibly true, or it's possibly just bargaining of hoping that this kind of random day is going to set everything back into a state of normalcy for us. So that's a good example of bargaining. Depression, I don't think I need to explain that. There is great, great sadness across the board. There's great loss, there's job loss, there's literal loss of loved ones, there's sadness that this is life. You know, I see we have in our community, people are putting those I don't know if you guys do that, but there's the yard signs they're putting up for someone's birthday party because they can't have birthdays. And so it's just like, happy birthday, Olivia, happy 16th birthday as the cars drive by. And I think to myself, gosh, thank God my kids aren't like having to go through high school in this situation. But then there's a moment where I'm like, what if this is like our new normal? You know, and I go down that rabbit hole of, and so then that causes depression. And the last one is acceptance. This idea that I've kind of worked out that this is the new way of life, or that, you know, this is my new reality with my partner, that maybe we're moving down their pathway to recovery. Yes, I will have scars that will never go away from the magnitude of the lying and the gaslighting and the betrayal that happened when he was acting out in his addiction, his or her addiction. But now I can come to terms with, you know, he or she's worked a recovery program. I've worked a recovery program. We're launching into a new space where there's a new level of honesty, a new level of vulnerability that I will never, you know, 100% heal from the wounds and the scars from my history, but we can move and transcend to a new space of acceptance. And then David Kessler says that there's one more step that he wanted to add, and he added it after Elizabeth Kubler-Ross died, and after he lost his son, 21-year-old son, and he calls it the 6th stage of grieving, which is making meaning. And by the way, that does not mean making meaning of the tragedy that happened, right? You don't need to make meaning. I live in Thousand Oaks, where a young man walked into a bar and killed 12 people. There's not really a way to make meaning of someone randomly taking 12 people off this earth, but it's more about, and it's not about, let's get to the make meaning part. Let's go to creating the memorial site, and let's go lay flowers there, and let's write about these people, and let's make meaning of their life and how much it meant to us, and how we're going to stop, you know, mass shootings and stuff like that. You have to still go through the pain. You can't bypass the pain. You have to like feel it and process it in order to heal it. So it doesn't mean that you need to make sense of the loss and the chaos and the insanity. Can't make sense of your husband's sex addiction, or make sense of, you know, all the betrayal and hurt that happened, or the lying, etc. But it's about making meaning from what happens from that moment on, and your response to it. And the other part that I mentioned is that grief has to have witnesses to it. Grief is not a process that's supposed to be done and experienced alone. In order for that to happen, though, people around you and you yourself can't judge the grieving process. It is, from my experience personally and professionally, the most messiest emotion I've ever seen. So the same woman, you know, my mom can die in our family system. Same person, we all watch the same thing happen. But every person around, her sisters, her husband, her children, her, you know, friends and family around her, grieved it and processed it at different stages in different ways throughout a different time. And it's not linear. It is not chronological. And the more you try to make it that way, the more miserable the grieving and loss process that's going to be for you and for other people. So sometimes it takes a lot of courage to say this, but sometimes you need to kind of lay down the law and say, I'm grieving. I'm in a state of struggle. You're not responsible for it. You just need to hold space for it, and you don't get to judge me for it. And so for those of you who are maybe betrayed partners and want to talk to other people about this nightmare that has unraveled in your life over the past recent months or years, they'll put a lot of, you know, we'll just leave him. Why are you still with this person? You know, I've heard this story over and over again, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes you need to be so bold to say, I'm just grieving. I'm just processing this. I'm holding space. I'm a human. Any human that would go through this would understandably suffer in this way and struggle in this way. And I don't need you to judge it. I trust me, I've judged it myself. I've beat myself down about it enough myself. I don't need somebody else to tell me how I should be grieving this and what I should be doing in response to this. I just need space for someone to say, you're right, I can't possibly get what you're going through. And if you need to be angry today or bargain today or depressed today, or you happen to be in a state of acceptance today, or you've made some meaning to some part of this, I just get to be a witness to it. And so that's what I hope that you can all find when you're in the state of grieving. So I think we talked about making sense of it and having gratitude. I'm just going to leave you with one quote of this really great book I'm reading right now. It's called Pastrix, The Cranky, Beautiful Faith of a Sinner and Saint by Nadia Bolz-Weber. She's a really interesting story. And when she speaks, I'm kind of like, wow, we're like kindred spirits. But she writes about, she was a chaplain in like an ER hospital for a while. And one of her chapters of a book is talking about what she learned about grief and loss from this kind of hot mess environment where she's supposed to walk in and be like a spiritual support system when people are going through the greatest tragedy moments of their life. So you hear a lot of nonsense in hospitals and funeral homes. God had a plan. We just don't know what it is. Maybe God took your daughter because he needs another angel in heaven. But when I've experienced loss and felt so much pain that it feels like nothing ever else existed, the last thing I need is a well-meaning but vapid person saying that when God closes a door, he opens a window. It makes me want to ask, where exactly is that door so I can push him the hell out of it? But this is the nonsense spawned from bad religion. And usually when you are grieving and someone says something so senselessly optimistic to you, it's about them. Either they want to feel like they can say something helpful, or they simply cannot allow themselves to entertain the finality and pain of death. So instead, they turn it into a precious moments greeting card. I've both had those things said to me and have been the one to say them. But as a chaplain, I felt that people really just needed me to mostly shut the hell up and deal with the reality of how painful it all is. It was mind-blowing and liberating to me as a therapist. I remember thinking one of the most intimidating things to me when I was being a therapist is like, how do I hold space for people who've gone through so much trauma and hurt and suffering? And like, I can't wrap my brain around it. I don't know. And there was this, through several teachings and experiences, I learned I just need to be present with them. When they cry, I can cry. When they suffer, my heart can suffer with them. And I don't have to know exactly what they're going through. I don't have to have any words. I don't have to have a special word or an answer. I don't have to fix it. I don't have to fix it. It's not my job. It's just my job to let them not feel like a freak of nature as they lose their shit. And I get to just be a witness to it. That this is like the crappy, dark part of humanity. And I have to just hold space for the scary part that there's good and there's evil. There's joy and there's pain. And I can't let my shame or my worry about being inept and not showing up in the way that I want to show up, or holy shit, I hope that never happens to me, overwhelm me from being in a place with somebody else who's in a grief and loss state. And that's what I want you to know about grief and loss.
You started out talking about our society is really bad at this, and I had this. We are, because we want to get over it, get onto it, and I also think we don't we want to numb out. We don't want to feel uncomfortable. Addicts.
Well said.
Particularly will do anything to numb out and escape. But I think in other cultures, they hold a space for the grief, and they do it as a community and all of that. And I thought, wow, because we're always like, we don't have time for that. We, what to do?
Ain't got time for that.
Yeah, got to keep running. I was thinking while you were talking to you about, how non-linear they are. And it isn't a failure if you get to acceptance one day and then you're back in depression the next, or denial, or, I mean, it's all over the place. And there's not, oh, good, thank goodness I'm going up the stairs and I'm almost to acceptance and then I'm going to find meaning and it's all going to be great. That isn't how it works. And, so it's constantly, but it's not a failure. And I think it's really easy to feel like if I don't, get to this, oh, I've got acceptance and I'm using it, that there's something wrong with us, and it's not. I don't want to be stuck in the grief. And to me, that is challenging, to not get stuck, meaning like I need to continue to engage and feel those uncomfortable feelings and process. I loved what you said, that it, grief has to have witnesses, not be experienced alone. And I thought that's really true. And it was so funny. I got to go to a real 12-step meeting yesterday.
Oh my God.
We sat in the park, but
Awesome.
just
Right.
being around people. But we talked about this. In fact, I actually, I brought up, I'm willing to be vulnerable. I'm willing to get hurt. I'm willing to have to grieve because there was meaning. It's, in my active addiction, I'm dissociated, I'm compartmentalized, I'm safe, but I don't get to experience the joy of connection. I will take getting hurt, and I have been, but I'm willing to put myself out there because the richness of my life is the connections that I have with people. That's what really matters. And what has been so hard during COVID is the disconnect. I mean, I appreciate Zoom. I do Zoom a lot, but like just the ability to see people, and like that's how I got into recovery, was sitting in a meeting with other people. We were socially distanced, we were outside, geese were flying overhead. It was, a unique experience, but I was incredibly grateful for that.
Right.
Like, I've heard more people go, I can't wait for this year to be over. And I'm like, I want to say, honey.
But that's bargaining, right?
I know.
It's like thinking that 2020 is going to wrap it up into a pretty package and move it into a new stage.
It's all going to be fine.
I know. And we have to, it's understandable, but it's also a moment you have to be like, oh, they're at bargaining stage. Like they haven't lost their mind.
Yeah.
Like a part of them knows that means nothing, but that's okay.
I think being able to be present, one of the things that I heard from somebody who had a loss of it was a loss of a spouse. And he shared the most meaningful thing that someone said and did for him was, they said, I don't know what you're going through. They just sat down and they said, I'm just here. And that was the most powerful thing. It wasn't none of the platitudes of like another angel or, oh, you'll get through that. And none of that. It was just, I'm here, and just being physically present and silent, didn't continue to prattle on, just here. That was the most meaningful thing. And I learned that, and I'm that I've tried to employ that when I'm experiencing somebody who's clearly struggling with loss. But I tell partners all the time, and addicts too, but partners all the time, there's so much grief. It's grieving the loss of the relationship you thought you had, grieving the loss of the partner you thought you had. I mean, all of that, is a grieving process. And to sell yourself short and not, go through that, I think you get it all just trapped up inside you. So. Okay, so the first question, can you please talk about grief and loss you go through when your spouse just leave one day without any explanation, just poof, gone? It's devastating, and it's hard when you don't get any answers, especially after being betrayed. It feels like grieving a living death, and I am not his first family he did this to.
This just came up in my workshop last night because one of the people had that, like a partner of like 30 years just walked up and said, I don't want to be married anymore. And then she said that's the last time she saw him. It's been a year. And I have to tell you, our brain is wired for story. So our brain, I mean, the most simple example of it I want to explain is, have you ever been in a restaurant and you hear like a noise, a really loud noise in the background, and your brain quickly goes, that sounds like a huge amount of dishes shattering. I'm in a restaurant. Sometimes that happens, but I still need to turn around and identify exactly where it is, because my brain needs to write a complete, succinct story so it can turn down the stress hormones, turn down the hypervigilance, and get you present again in the conversation with the person in front of you. You cannot connect to the human in front of you or the situation in front of you, whatever that is, like the rest of your life, if your brain has not been given a full and complete story about what's happened. And so the most traumatic part of someone just leaving, just going, and you don't know why, you don't know under what context, you want to blame yourself and say that there's parts of you that maybe you did wrong. I don't know, did I do something wrong? Did I say something? What, like, there's all these other humans out here who haven't been rejected and left all of a sudden. Am I some special freak human that is someone to leave without explanation? Like, there's all these question marks that pop up in your brain because your brain is desperately seeking out a story so it kind of can wrap it up into a package and stick it away. And so it takes so much work to kind of be wrapping up your side of the story without any kind of information from the other person. So it is much more difficult to come to terms with the grief and the loss and what happened and how it happened and the context of how it happened. So you can kind of fully collect the story and the narrative and transcend through it. It's a process.
And I was thinking, and this is not make it okay, but this is not the first time he's done it. So you have more data that this is not you, this is him. Right. I mean, he this is his pattern. So that I know how devastating this is. I really understand. But you know, he sounds like a very broken person, and unfortunately he doesn't sound like he's getting help. I'm really glad you're here and getting support. You know, this is not you. And it's, I think, I mean, death is horrible because, you know, someone's completely gone, but this is just someone's choosing to vanish, and it would leave us feeling like it has to be me. But
yeah,
this one I'm real clear on. This is him. So,
and speaking of platitudes, the soundbite I use to try to conjure up more understanding and empathy and compassion for everybody is hurt people hurt people. You know, pain that is not transformed is transmitted. When people don't go through their own healing process, identify it, talk about it, process it, understand it, in the state of their discomfort, their shame, their trauma, they hurt people. They act incongruently, they lash out, and that's the result. You know, someone just randomly walking out of a relationship because they can't handle the vulnerability of it, the shame around it, or whatever. It's hurt people hurt people.
You know, any more examples or guidance on what the bargaining stage is?
It's just kind of when you talk to the universe or the world, or you kind of make up a story that this is going to be the end of the suffering, right? So bargaining is, okay, if I'm religious, then maybe no bad things are going to happen to me. Or if I pray, then, you know, I'm going to spare myself from this kind of thing. Bargaining, like we said, maybe at the end of 2020, we'll count it out as a canceled out, really crappy year. And 2021 will finally be when things will be better. It's just when we kind of reach out to those, I want to say arbitrary or superficial, but they're not. Like, they have meaning to them. There are brains trying to find, like, okay, this might be when the suffering ends. I need to know that the suffering ends here. I need to know that there's hope for this. Or it's also, I take it as information of, there's something that there's meaning within it, right? But you just have to kind of be careful of it. Just look how much bargaining is going on. Never allows you to kind of escape from the reality of what also is going on, right? So bargaining would be if you found out your husband had an addiction and it's all getting unraveled, it would be, oh, well, maybe if I wasn't so stressful to him, or if I hadn't nagged him so much or something, or maybe if his mom wasn't such a horrible human to him. There might be, I guess, maybe some facet where you're just trying to say, okay, I love him. I want him to be healthier. How can I promote and support a healthier recovery version of him? And maybe how can I make sure I clean up my side of the street and have a healthier partnership between the two of us? But it's not really, the reality isn't like if you'd had sex with him more, he wouldn't have gone out and had sex with prostitutes, right? That's not realistic, right? So there, you can always find deeper meaning in what you're bargaining, what you're kind of trying to bargain and get to and ask for. But you have to just be very careful about it.
Okay, so the next question, grieving my identity as a wife is gone. How my sons have a mother who is no longer the mom they know from the trauma of my SA husband, and how it changed my relationship with them. Grieving no family support, only judgment. I am staying right now in hope of his recovery, grieving the loss of my emotional, relational, mental, physical, and financial stability. Grieving we are separated, 43 years of marriage or memories now tainted. How long does it take to walk through and come out a phoenix?
Yeah. So you wrote and shared with all of us beautifully what so many of you are going through. And I'm not going to give you platitudes of making you feel like this pain and the multi levels of loss and hurt can be packaged. I mean, all I can do is just say, you're not the only one. I have a whole workshop filled with people in the state of suffering that you're in. I can tell you that people do get through it. People can, whether or not their partner goes into recovery, they can transcend it. It takes so much work, right? Because the person that you love the most, the person that you made yourself vulnerable to the most, just ended up like not being anything that you thought. And there's a process, obviously I encourage you to get help from somebody who has experience in supporting people who are betrayed partners. There's lots of really great books and podcasts and support. I would fill your ears and your soul up with people who don't have judgment about wanting to stay with the person or not wanting to stay with the person, or hoping that they're recovering, or maybe they will, or maybe they won't, about how you'll run the gamut from 1 minute you'll be joyful to screaming to crying to bargaining, and be with around a couple people. There are groups, there are support groups for people like that can hold space for them. And I just saw too, last comment is, you have sons, and your partner, as we know, addicts usually are acting out of kind of trauma, emotional stuntedness. I want the easy button because I don't know what to do with all this going on inside. And so you want to make sure that you're raising your sons with an understanding that it's okay to be sad. Like, look at me, watch me. I'm really, really sad, and I'm going to survive this. I will make it through this. I'm sure sometimes it feels like that's not the case, but you want them to watch you struggle in the different facets and know that they can't fix it. That it's okay to hold space for you being in a state of struggle, because you're role modeling to them that we can be in these deep, dark places and we can transcend from it. And this is okay. It's not going to kill us, but it has to be a part of the process. And it is an opportunity. I know that's a really tough word to swallow right now, but to show that I can struggle in all these different ways and be in a grief and loss state, and that's okay. And that does not mean that there's any responsibility for you to fix it, for anyone to numb it out, to ignore it. Like, this is okay.
Okay, next question. I listened and you said grieving the loss of the relationship you thought you had. What is your, what if you're still in a relationship, but literally grieving the loss of that kind of relationship I thought I had? Exactly what I was talking
Same thing.
about. Yeah. Like you thought it was, here we are together.
We tell each
us
other the
against
truth.
world. Yes.
We're totally committed to each
I've
other.
got
We're
his back, he's
teammates.
got
Yep.
mine. Yep, all of that. Yeah, and so it doesn't mean that you left the relationship. It's just like, oh, that wasn't, all the things I thought aren't true. It doesn't mean that everything was a lie, but you're in that sorting all of that out is like, well, if that's a lie, because it's really easy to go, if that's a lie, then everything's a lie. And so parsing out, well, that really was true, and that isn't. So it's really challenging. But the rest of the question is, and I want to communicate with your partner on what you feel has been lost based on knowledge or new circumstances. Can you suggest safe ways to approach, then get to communications flowing? It's challenging to learn to navigate that yourselves. You can, but if you can get a little support, I think you might find it really useful. Other thoughts, Kristin?
Yeah, is basically, I have that webinar that I did. It's called the Neurobiology of Trauma or Betrayal Trauma. And that is, I think, first and foremost, when you identify, and this is where the work comes in, that someone's saying something, right? So he's going to run out and say, I'm going to go drop the dry cleaning off. And suddenly you feel that, like, why do I want to follow him? Why do I really want to make sure that's where he goes? Why do I want to check his wallet? And I want to make sure he has that dry cleaning receipt. Those are all okay. That's part of you grieving the loss of the fact that you don't trust him anymore. You don't have to be embarrassed by that. You don't have to feel like you're failing because of that. You need to give that a voice. And at first, to me, in my opinion, it shows up in your body feeling hypervigilant, unsafe, wanting to check things. And that's just your body saying something's not right. You don't feel safe. Make yourself feel safe. And then you just kind of, the words that I learned is just like, hey, when you took off to go to the dry cleaner, it just reminded me of the times that you would take off and go drink or go make those phone calls that were to the woman or whatever. Can you please show me the receipt that you were at the dry cleaner? I think that would make me feel safer to know that you were there. Or other things. Sometimes, we've talked about, there's other boundaries of, like, I need to have like the GPS tracker on your phone so I actually can know where you are. Sometimes people need polygraphs to know that the disclosure that you gave or what you've been claiming is the truth is truly the truth. These are not signs of failure. These are not signs of being wrong or irrational or anything like that. It's you and your partner cannot have an intimate connection with each other without safety and trust, or a level of trust. And you need to set up a life and a recovery plan that allows you to feel safe again. And there shouldn't be any kind of embarrassment. Now, you don't have to be like, because you destroyed my trust, because you were a horrible human being, because everything out of your mouth is a big fat lie, I need this, this, and this. You can just say, my body feels really unsafe around you. I'm sorry, but the things that you say, I just don't really know what's truth or not. And so there's going to be some times I'm going to need to check in, ask for some follow-up, ask for some, proof to verify. And that's going to hopefully help me feel safer.
So the next question is, can an addict go through the stages of grief, one that is in true recovery? Yes, I'm going to, yes, there, like,
it's part of it.
Yeah, we have to grieve the loss of being able to act out. We have to grieve the loss of being able to numb out. So the stuff I gave up in my addiction, so glad it's gone, because what I got for in exchange for being willing to do the work is, all of the connections that I have, all the good stuff in my life is a result of recovery. But sure, our little brains are going to go, oh, I can't, do whatever it is I want to do anymore, so.
And I think one of the most important recovery steps is coming to terms with what you're capable of doing and capable of being. Right? Like, we like to think that we're these people, these types of people, good, lovable, Perfect. And then kind of there's a grief of it's like, oh no, I'm capable of being a very good liar. And there's this grief of needing to grieve your imperfections and how much you're capable of sucking.
Yeah, yeah, and being in the position of having to own it,
Yeah, or who you've
it's very
hurt in the
different.
process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's absolutely part of it, hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And forgiveness. It's all hand in hand.
How do you help children ages 6 through 8 through the grieving process? I don't know. I hope this is not that they found out about the sex addictions. That's always so traumatic. But for me, the first thought is like model it. Like
Yeah,
model it and just be there and support them and
right.
help
So
them have their feelings.
I did that webinar on parenting in crisis, and that's what this is kind of about, is how you being a representation of secure attachment, showing the appropriate emotions. Because by the way, life's not all great and roses and cherries. It's sad and confusing and scary, and I'm imperfect in the way I execute it. So that means it's okay for you, little children, to be imperfect. Sometimes you'll be sad, but then you'll throw things because you're sad. And I get it. Like, that's how it gets messy, but you just kind of help them name it, because you're supposed to be their executive functioning part of the brain. So sometimes at a 6 and 8-year-old, it's not going to be executed congruently. Like I said, it's going to be like, they're going to be sad or they're going to feel scared. And so they'll punch their sister or something, because they'll act out incongruently. And it's important that you kind of name for them on their behalf. You can ask, wow, is your heart angry? Is your heart sad? What's going on for you? Let's pick a better way to emote this way. Let's pick a better way to do it. Can we draw a picture about it? Can we tell a story about it? And it's just funneling through that kind of stuff. But I think that webinar covered it pretty well, that parenting in crisis.
So any of these webinars, you can go to YouTube and Kristin's website, KristinSnowden.com, or you'll see them on our previously recorded webinars on sexandrelationship.com too. Next question. I'm a recovering SA, currently 66 days of sobriety. As no surprise, I'm grieving the various things and addressing the root of my issues. I have had this issue for 20 years of life. However, as will the many addicts, I've experienced moments where my addiction hasn't shown up. I've been with my partner for 5 years and struggling with grieving the loss of the image I had of my partner. While we were together, she was actually physically involved with other people. I always knew every time this behavior was going on, and even being reassured, gaslit that it wasn't, I would shove it down and then cope by acting out in my addiction. Early on, I approached my partner about this and have noticed she doesn't initiate sex with me. I've brought it up with her, and she's never once during our 5 years attempted to address this. I'm struggling with where my addiction starts with this issue and this issue begins.
Mm-hmm.
It's not her fault I acted out with porn, etc. However, I feel like it's a source of my acting out, which is BS. I shouldn't hold her to the standard of her actions as are the reason I acted out. I feel so destroyed and lost. So, okay, that's a lot.
It is, but you know what? It's a symptom of your brain trying to understand. And actually, you're working it out great. You really are, because I hear you're angry and hurt about this, but you know that this is your stuff and this is her stuff, and I can't make somebody do something that I don't want them to do, but God, this stuff hurts me. And when she's hurting me, I don't know how to handle it. So I act out in these ways, and it just fills my anger and my shame. And that's not the kind of person that I want to be.
Yeah.
And this is what happens. This is recovery. Yeah. And I say, keep going. You are doing it. You are showing that you are a fully alive, fully awoke person. And you are moving forward, trying to make sense, trying to meet life in life's terms, and getting there. This is the process. I mean, wouldn't you agree, Tammy? It's
yes. And the last line, I feel so destroyed and lost. And I'm gonna, you're here, so you're not lost. You're here, and right. You're doing one day at a time. I mean, that's, you're early in recovery. I promise it gets better. I promise. Hang on, just keep doing what you need to do. Connect with other people. We've got multiple drop-in groups every week on this platform, but there are so many resources. So that's what those groups are for, is to help you connect. You're not lost. And you're not destroyed. You're here. You're going to be resilient. You're going to be able to figure this out. But I've had this issue for 20 years, and I'm thrilled that you've got 66 days, but you've got 66 days of addressing issues that have been going on for 20 years. It won't take you 20 years to address it, but it's going to take you time. And be careful about going to the root of the issues this early. My experience is that can be really triggering too. So just know that you're on a journey, and it's going to pace yourself. Have good support, have people that are walking with you, and it will get easier. But the emotional roller coaster too, I swear, I don't even remember the first bunch of time I was, starting, sobriety, etc. Like the emotions, because I had to deal with them, and that was challenging. So just understand it's part of the process, but you're not alone.
Can you mourn together the loss of your marriage due to the addiction? And I say absolutely. Remember, the more witnesses you can have to your struggle, who are safe, who don't judge it, the better. Something that David Kessler said that really hit me hard is because this was during a podcast where Brene Brown was interviewing him. And she said, my understanding is that the data shows after a huge loss, like a child dying within a marriage, that a lot of these marriages don't survive the loss. And he said, I'm going to get his wording wrong, but he said, basically, it's not the tragedy that happened that tears them apart. It's judging the grief process in the other person and yourself that tears the relationship apart. So when you're mourning the loss of your marriage, do respect that he or she is going to mourn at a different stage. They might be feeling just okay in that acceptance phase of, okay, this is where we are. And you may be in the depressed stage that day. And you may not feel like gratitude that you're still together. You may be questioning the decision to stay together. And then there may be a day where someone in the family system is bargaining, but you're in the denial of, no, this didn't happen. This is not my life. This is not how it's going to go. If you cannot judge his or her process and not judge your process and where you're at, then you guys can mourn together more in a more healing way.
If you ever need resources, email Tammy, Tami, at seekingintegrity.com, and I will do my best to help you find the right fit for you. Yes. So okay,
these were great questions. This was a great meeting today, and I'm really glad that this topic resonated with everybody, and I hope you guys all got something from it.
I did. I always do.
Man, we can't talk enough about grief and loss. I feel like everyone needs like a monthly reminder that this is okay. This is just another aspect of the human experience.
And I really hold to what you said, is like, we as a society do this poorly, and but we as individuals can learn to do it differently and show up differently, for others and for ourselves. And that would be a start. So Kristin, it was great to see you. I put in the chat. Oh, somebody's got a question, but I put, yeah. Oh, yeah. I put in the chat, KristinSnowden.com. If you want to learn more, she will start another betrayed partner group. I know she will. And lots of resources. So feel free to check those out. So thank you all.
You can find me on my website, KristinSnowden.com. I have a YouTube channel as well. Email me. I try to answer relatively quickly. I try to provide resources as well, but that's often sending you to Tammy for more resources.
Yeah, so. we go back and forth, if they're a fit. Yeah, I'm absolutely. So thank you all for the great questions and your participation. Yeah, there is hope. I see lots of people heal. So there is hope. Even if you don't stay in the relationship, we can heal. I'm glad you're here. So thank you, Kristin. We'll see you next month.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.